Yeah, so I saw the Young Turfs trending on Twitter this morning, and I was like, that's weird. I wonder what happened. I wonder why that's trending, right? And then I see that Anna Kasparian is trending. So I'm like, well, I better go to Anna Kasparian's profile to see what's up. Oops, I forgot. She blocked us. So yeah, unfortunately, I'm blocked by Anna Kasparian. We're blocked by Anna Kasparian on the main Vanguard Twitter, but little does Anna Kasparian know, little did she account for. I have my other Twitter, my personal Twitter, which all you guys should go follow, FYI. So let's journey over here to my Brave browser so I can show you guys exactly her hot take that has the whole internet up in arms. She says, "I'm a woman. Please don't ever refer to me as a person with a uterus, birthing person, or person who menstruates. How do people not realize how degrading this is? You can support the transgender community without doing this shit." And of course, a lot of people called her out for this one. We'll get into a myriad of responses she got from people that are her own allies and her own friends and colleagues, as well as a lot of people like Carrie Lake, for example, who are on the far right, basically fascists we're talking about here. But just to address this sentiment, I have a little bit of mixed feelings on this, to be completely honest, because I think that on its face value, yeah, the term birthing person, like it does sound a little bit dehumanizing. It makes it sound like your whole personhood is being reduced down to your ability to give birth and to make babies. So I can understand if you just hear that term, how you might be a little bit turned off by it, and you might be like, well, that's not really an appropriate way to refer to a woman as a birthing person. What are you fucking talking about? That sounds crazy. That sounds like something out of The Handmaid's Tale or some
Bethany
shit.
Mendel calling herself a proud breeder.
Exactly. So I can understand that. And I think that a lot of people who may not be really tuned into politics or the discourse around trans issues and the sort might hear that and be off put, understandably. But the thing is that, first of all, very few people actually use these terms, right? I went to college. Obviously, colleges are pretty, notorious for their liberal values and their liberal brainwashing and all that stuff. Not once in my 4 years at university did I hear anyone, any professor, any student, anyone in any role whatsoever use the word birthing person or person who menstruates instead of woman. And that goes for literally every other setting I've ever been in. Not school just came to mind because it's a place that people often think of as like a liberal institution. But anywhere, I live in Kansas City. Maybe if I lived in fucking Los Angeles or something, or New York City, I'd have a different experience, admittedly. But I've never heard anyone say birthing person. I've never heard anyone actually refer to people as or women as people who menstruate, stuff like that. So for one, I think this whole phenomenon is overrated. It's overhyped. I don't think that many people, if anyone, is actually trying all that desperately to change the way we talk about male and female and so on and so forth. But the other thing that has to be mentioned to this argument from people like Anna Kasparian is that these terms, person with a uterus, birthing person, person who menstruates, they're actually not a replacement for the term woman. No one is saying, instead of saying woman, let's now call women birthing people. It's a broader term that encompasses more individuals to account for the experience of non-women who still menstruate and non-women who still have the ability to give birth. Because of the existence of trans people and non-binary people, there actually is a class of, or a group of people that are capable of menstruating, that are capable of giving birth, but don't actually identify as women. So birthing person is not a replacement for the word woman. No one's going around saying man and birthing people instead of man and woman. No, it's used more in a medical sense when we're talking about something like reproductive rights, for example, or something like, menstruation and policies that might affect that. Then if you're talking about reproductive rights, for example, you can say, well, this abortion bill will mean this for people who have the ability to give birth, people who have the ability to reproduce. And that's not just women, because there are some trans men who still have the ability to reproduce. They still have the reproductive system of a female, even though they identify as a man. They're not women, but they still have the ability to menstruate, hence the term people who menstruate. I don't think it's that hard to wrap your mind around or wrap your head around. I don't think it's terribly hard to get that. And while I agree that on its face value, birthing person sounds a little bit off putting, it's really just in a specific context that it's being used, one that I think makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just feeds, again, this is a perfect example of this, of the Young Turks Network just amplifying and fanning the flames of right-wing rhetoric, right? Because, of, Cenk took to Twitter after this and he was like, well, if it's only being used in a political context, then that's totally fine. It's like, that is how it's being used, right? Like, you are unwilling to accept that there are other women that aren't going to have the same exact lived experience as a cisgendered woman, right? And that's what it comes back down to, right? Like the mere existence of these people being like a point of frustration for you, or being a point where you're like, I don't want to be anything like these people, right? Like, we have to be different. It's like, why do you feel the need to differentiate yourself in this way, right? Like, okay, yes, cis women are different than trans women, but they're both women. That's why we call cis women cisgendered women, and trans women, right? And this encompasses the nuances of the experiences of the fucking 21st century, right? I just don't get the fucking up in arms, like the need to be like incensed by this. It's like, it's not like anybody is like going into a bathroom and now it says birthing person on it, right? It's not like anybody's going to the restaurant and they're like, this is birthing person night, half the price shots for everybody that's a birthing person. Like, this is not, it's not ubiquitous like that. It is used in specific niche areas to talk about how, yes, we need to provide access to menstrual products for all people, right? And you don't want to invalidate the identity of somebody who maybe is non-binary. Maybe, I know plenty of non-binary people who, menstruate, right? Like, what are they supposed to just be chopped liver? Are they not allowed to be part of the conversation? Does inclusive language really undermine your existence that much? Are you that fragile, right? I mean, it's pretty ridiculous, right? And I mean, you could think of like all kinds of examples of where like people want to hold on to again, we were talking about this just the other day, actually, about how people want to hold on to antiquated language because there's power in that language, right? There's power in keeping rhetorically like the language that we're using the way that it was. And people will say, oh no, I'm just fighting for this definition. And what you're really articulating is you're fighting for a regressed time period. You're fighting to go back to before there was any acknowledgement or any recognition for trans women, non-binary people, trans men, as we made the point, can still menstruate. So the fact that you're repelled by the inclusion of those individuals in these broader discussions, I think, is the revealing part of this, right? Of course, this isn't The Handmaid's Tale. No woman is reduced down to being a fucking womb. No woman is reduced down to being a carrier of a fetus. That's not something that anybody is trying to make the case for, right? But, just having a huge fucking tantrum about people who use inclusive language and saying that you refuse to be a part of it, like, okay, like, just run right into the arms of the fucking, groomer crowd, right? Like, that's what they want. That's like, this is a massive W for that. That's why people like Ben Shapiro retweeted this. You saw people like Carrie Lake getting into their replies because they love this shit. And honestly, this is what Anna Kasparian's role is in media at this point, right? It is, how do I, in my own neoliberal, wine mom fashion, how do I become fodder for conservative talking points, right? How do I become a generator for topics that, conservatives are gonna like retweet me, how I'm gonna be the good lefty, right? Like, I'm gonna be the lefty that goes on Ben Shapiro's show and tells him that the rest of the left is crazy and that we need way more cops, and that in the most incarcerated country in America, the real solution is fucking more cops, and that we just let everybody go in this country, even though that is not borne out by a single fact if you actually did your homework, right? And it's just a continuation of that. It's, how do I frame this issue so that it has me being the rational lefty, and then the right can be like, see, even this lefty agrees with us. I mean, we've talked about how that's a model for success on the internet across the board, right? And it's actually the exact opposite of what we just described as the behavior coming from Kyle. This is clearly trying to generate controversy. This is clearly trying to like repivot, right? And it makes sense because the Bernie Sanders movement is over. And Anna and Cenk want to be more of like an MSNBC light. They want to be MSNBC online. They do not want to have the nuanced kind of critical analysis that we once saw from them as inspired by the Bernie Sanders movement. And now we're seeing what I would imagine was a lot more similar to the content of like 2010, 2012 era Young Turks Network, where there's like a little bit of an edgelord element to it. There's a little bit of an online element, but at the end of the day, their politics aren't radically progressive. They're just not. Cenk Uygur will sit here and tell you the benefits of, why it actually is the best that the guy sitting at the top of the chair of the corporation is raking in all this because he took the risk. And, we watched him have that debate with Hassan Piker not too long ago. I mean, this isn't a guy that, is his value set is where our value set is at. So it's just a matter of now there's no longer an opportunity to capitalize on this in the news. And so they've moved it to where they think there's a wider swath of people that are interested in consuming their content.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And some people in chat are saying like, oh, well, would you guys want to be called people who produce semen or whatever? And in certain contexts, no, I wouldn't care about that at all. Like if you're talking about vasectomies, for example, and how vasectomies impact people who produce semen or sperm or whatever, would that somehow be like an attack on my manhood if in a medical context where the discussion was vasectomies, they said, well, this is going to affect people who have the ability to produce sperm? Do I all of a sudden, is my masculinity threatened by that because of the reality and the acknowledgement that some people who don't identify as men have the ability to produce sperm? No, that's not a fucking attack on my masculinity. I don't give a shit about that at all. Now, admittedly, if someone walked up to Anna Kasparian and said, hey, you birthing person, hey, you person who menstruates, come over here. Okay, well, obviously that's incredibly degrading, and you shouldn't do that to anyone, just like you shouldn't refer to a man as a fucking sperm producer. Hey, get over here, sperm producer, produce some sperm for me. Obviously, that's problematic. But if we're talking about like a medical context or in the context of a abortion bill or some issue that has to do with reproductive rights, or hey, they increase the tax on tampons or something, or decrease the tax on menstrual products, this will affect people who have the ability to menstruate, some of which are not women, some of which identify as men or something in between man and woman. That's okay. It doesn't matter. To use language which includes those people is not an offense to you. It's not an assault to you. It's not an affront to your personal womanhood, nor the womanhood of any other woman who identifies proudly as a woman. That's fine. No one's trying to take that away from you. And I just don't really understand this kind of straw man argument of like, they're trying to, change the way people talk about women. They're trying to just turn us into birthing people. Like, that's actually not really what's happening. And honestly, that is a right-wing talking point that's
and that
just
would be
untrue.
the right wing that's trying to take away your right to an abortion, by the way, in every single state. And I also think that it's important to point out that a lot of the people that use this kind of rhetoric are the ones that are like, oh, well, you have to be able to define what a woman is, and a woman is somebody with a uterus. And it's like, well, we were all saying that's not true. We were all over here being like, what about somebody that's fucking gone through menopause? What about somebody like, we were the ones over here saying, well, that's not true though, right? Like, that's just biologically, that doesn't bear out. It's conservatives that were fucking shitting their loads about, oh, what is a woman? The left can't define what a woman is. They don't know what a woman is. They've never been to biology class, right? Those are the people who you're running into the warm embrace of now. The people who do view you as a uterus, the people who do view you as a birthing person, right? You are running right into the warm embrace of the Carrie Lakes and the Ben Shapiro and the people who do want you to be a stay-at-home fucking fertile myrtle, okay? A little fucking birthing machine. That's essentially who you're aligning yourself with in an attempt to own the left, or the people who are fighting for reproductive rights in all 50 states, or the people who are trying to promote equality, right? And you notice this throughout history. If you ever look at prejudice and how people adopt them, it always starts with shit like this. This is how they reveal that they actually have a prejudice towards somebody, because they want to otherize that person. They don't want to accept that other person is on the same footing as them. They need a differentiating factor. They need that differentiating factor of, oh, I am a cis woman, that's a trans woman, we're not the same, just because it carries that aura of like, I don't know, that you're better off or whatever the fuck, or you are better or inherently like more natural than, a trans person.
And like I said, Anna got a lot of different responses here. Vaush chimed in, and Vaush and Anna are on really good terms. They're very friendly with one another. Anna was recently on Vaush's live stream for an interview, so it's not like these are people that don't like each other already. But yeah, Vaush says, I have never heard any of these terms outside of a few tweets and PowerPoint screenshots where academics grasp desperately for some inoffensive, inclusive medical terminology. And that's my experience as well. I know Adi was saying he's, had a slightly different experience as far as his rate of encountering these terms, but I'm in the same exact boat as Vaush here. I've really never heard these terms used. Definitely not in a mainstream case. Only ever in deep political discussions and discourse surrounding things like reproductive rights, stuff like that. To say that there's like some societal initiative or effort to change the human lexicon and turn everyone into someone who says birthing person in place of woman is absolutely ridiculous.
Yep, 100%. Couldn't agree with you more, Gavin. But it looks like we do have a couple of super chats to get to as well. They lost from my screen though because of fucking internet outside.
Oh yeah, we have a couple super chats to address. Let's look at a couple. Are you cool to look at a couple more responses Anna got before we address those, Zach?
Yeah, for sure. And then we've got Scott Denoyer coming on at 4:30.
Okay, gotcha. So yeah, we'll get to all the super chats, guys. Don't worry. But yeah, I did want to look at a couple more responses. Mac, friend of the show, says, "Is this really something that happens regularly? Seems like a hyper online thing. Worth going to bat for, given the bolstering of right wing trans hysteria." Great point from Mac. And again, if Anna wants to clarify and say, "Hey, I was walking down the street the other day, and someone turned to me and said, 'Hey, birthing person.'" Get over here. Like, obviously that's an exception. And I totally understand having an issue with that. That is incredibly dehumanizing, degrading, sounds terrible out of context. So if that's what happened, if someone just nonchalantly referred to her as a fucking birthing person, like, yeah, I get being offended by that. But she didn't clarify what the context was. She didn't clarify who, if anyone, actually referred to her that way and why, or where she encountered that.
I also think you could make the fair point that if Anna Kasparian's walking down the street and I say, "Hey, woman," she's not going to like that either. She's not going to like that either. Oh, I don't want somebody to just shout at me on the street. That's a fair thing to say. I don't think it matters what they call you. Like, "Get over here, woman. What's up, girl?" They don't like that shit. Nobody likes that shit. So I'm just like, in this context, you're making it impossible for it to sound like a fair word, right? It would be more like somebody saying, "Well, us birthing people," or "as a birthing person," like in a way that's inclusive and like super not offensive. And then I imagine that, Karen Kasparian, went to work.
Absolutely correct. 100%. That's such a good point, Zach. So let's look at one more response. Humanist Report chimed in. He says, "I respect you a lot, but this notion that the mere existence of trans inclusive terms, rarely used in casual convos, somehow degrades women comes right out of the right's anti-trans war on woman playbook. There's a reason why they're praising you for this." And that's a pretty good response in my opinion. I think that the Humanist Report is 100% on point there. And she responded to him, actually. She didn't respond to a lot of the criticism she got, but she did respond in this instance and said, "Hey, Mike, you're a guy who has no clue what it's like to have your reproductive freedom taken away, but consider what it's like to have the same lawmakers who failed to protect us or failed to protect our rights turn around and call us people with uteruses. It's not inclusive if cis women hate it."
Look, I think this is like clear obfuscation, right? Like, okay, Anna, you're not homeless. Shut the fuck up when it comes to homeless people. Like, what do you, how do you want me to deal with that? You're a political commentator, so is Mike. He's going to give his fucking take on this issue. So it's like, oh yeah, and you're not a queer person, Anna. Shut the fuck up. Okay, so see how it's easy to play that game if you want to be reductive about it. Like, no, of course not.